They say if you work hard, play by the rules, and keep your head down, good things will come. That's what I believed for 12 years, until the day I got called into a beige conference room and told I was no longer aligned with the company's direction. That's when everything changed. Has your hard work ever been ignored or dismissed by a manager, and later they realized they couldn't function without you? Drop a comment and let me know what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I see every one of you. My name's Daniel Hart, and I'm 34 years old. I'm not the loudest guy in the room, never have been. Born and raised in Ohio, moved to Chicago after college with 2 suitcases and a laptop. I've always believed in systems, order, logic, things making sense. That's why I went into data. Numbers don't lie, people do. And for the better part of a decade, I carved out a solid career for myself in the back end of corporate America. Middle management, mid-6 figures, nothing flashy, but respectable, reliable. I was the guy that made things work behind the scenes, the guy you called when a system broke or a process needed rethinking. And I loved it, not in some romantic way. God knows no one dreams of writing optimization models as a kid, but I liked the quiet satisfaction of building something solid. My team respected me. We hit deadlines, brought in clean data, avoided drama. I trained most of them myself. We weren't big, but we were efficient. There was pride in that. Then came Jeff Marston. New exec, new haircut, new buzzwords. He smiled with his teeth, but never his eyes. Said he wanted to modernize operations, streamline strategic execution. Within weeks, I was being cut out of meetings I used to lead. My best engineer got reassigned to another team without even a courtesy ping. By the 3rd month, Jeff was holding meetings with clients I'd onboarded, and he didn't even loop me in. I should have spoken up. I didn't. You always think if you just do good work, it'll speak for itself. It doesn't. The day it happened was a Thursday, late afternoon. I saw the meeting pop up on my calendar. No subject line, just quick chat. My stomach dropped. Jeff was waiting inside the room already, along with someone from HR who didn't even try to look me in the eye. The speech was canned. We're restructuring. It's not about performance. We appreciate everything you've contributed. I'd heard about layoffs like this before. Surgical, quiet, soulless. Still hits like a freight train when it's you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask why. I signed what they put in front of me, nodded like a good little soldier, and walked out with a cardboard box full of things no one would miss. But here's what Jeff didn't realize. In his hurry to erase me from the picture, he left a few back doors wide open. Small ones. Nothing obvious, nothing dangerous at first. I didn't plot revenge that night. I drank a beer on my balcony, stared out over the gray skyline, and told myself to let it go. But then I started checking in. Quietly, casually, and what I saw made my stomach turn. He wasn't just cutting fat. He was carving out the company's soul, replacing it with cheap slides and bullshit. That's when I knew. He didn't just fire me, he fired the wrong guy. It started with habit more than intent. My work laptop was still logged into a few of the back-end systems, ones Jeff didn't think to decommission because they weren't officially part of my role anymore. Technically, they were shared tools. Budget dashboards, long-term planning templates, internal process documentation. No one ever changed the admin logins because no one ever thought to. I'd built half of those systems. I knew where the bones were buried. The first time I checked, it was just curiosity. Maybe pride. I wanted to see how the department was doing without me, whether Jeff's golden touch was working. What I found instead was chaos dressed up as strategy, missed delivery dates, conflicting KPI goals, vendor contracts renewed without review, budgets rebalanced in ways that made 0 sense. He was cutting headcount but increasing discretionary spending on vague innovation initiatives, hiring consultants to fix problems my team had already solved. The man was lighting money on fire, and no one was stopping him. At first I thought, not my problem anymore. I tried to focus on the job hunt. I cleaned up my resume, sent out applications, even went to a couple interviews. But something kept dragging me back to that dashboard, to those spreadsheets. Watching the slow bleed was like witnessing someone burn down your childhood home one wall at a time. And then, one night around 1 a.m., something snapped. I was staring at the quarterly planning worksheet Jeff's team had uploaded. It was riddled with errors. Numbers that didn't add up, assumptions that made no fiscal sense. And there it was, my name, still listed in the access permissions. Admin level, just sitting there, unnoticed. I hovered over it for a long time. I wasn't going to delete anything. I'm not a saboteur. But I knew how the planning system fed into the budget submission pipeline, and I knew exactly how to introduce friction, subtle, legal, deniable friction. I started small. A budget line got duplicated, just enough to trigger a flag in compliance. A quarterly projection didn't load into the master file, causing delays in downstream approvals. A hyperlink in a shared sheet suddenly pointed to last quarter's file instead of the current one. Nothing that screamed malicious, just enough to make things harder, slower, uncertain. And when Jeff's team tried to move fast, to close a vendor contract early, to reroute project funds, they hit bottlenecks. Approvals went missing. Systems kicked back errors. Finance started asking questions. I didn't leave fingerprints. I didn't have to. They'd assumed I was gone, forgotten. But I was still there, in the background, quietly pulling threads. And I wasn't alone. One of my old team members, Liz, a sharp analyst with a mean instinct for patterns, texted me late one night. "Is it just me, or is everything falling apart since you left?" I stared at her message, then typed back, "Not just you." Once the first cracks showed, it didn't take long for the rest to spread. The team Jeff inherited was solid, but not bulletproof. They'd been built for precision, not firefighting. I hadn't hired showboats. I'd hired thinkers, detail people. When you strip out that kind of foundation, all you're left with is panic and posturing. I watched from the sidelines like a ghost in the machine. Liz kept texting, carefully, like she knew someone might be watching. "New metrics dashboard rolled out today," she wrote one morning. "Half the team couldn't access it. Morale is tanking. Jeff's blaming IT." She didn't know the dashboard error came from a simple permissions bug I'd quietly reintroduced. A bug Jeff himself had insisted we fix last year when he wanted faster onboarding. Funny how fast urgent becomes invisible once you stop getting credit for it. It wasn't long before other former colleagues started reaching out too. Paul from procurement, Tasha from finance. None of them knew the full picture, but they all felt it. Delays, confusion, second-guessing. Tasha said she got reprimanded for a budget overage she flagged months ago. Jeff had dismissed it, told her to focus on the bigger picture. Now it was somehow her fault. The thing about people like Jeff is they rise fast because they're loud, not because they're right. They talk in circles, sound confident, and know how to play the room. But they don't build, they acquire, and when things break, they blame. That's exactly what was happening. Each week, his tone got tighter in emails, his meetings more aggressive, and the more pressure he applied, the more mistakes he made. I didn't need to destroy him. I just had to let him keep digging. That's when I got the idea. The budget. The annual planning cycle was coming up. A bloated, multi-step process I knew inside and out. I'd helped design it years ago, back when people actually cared about long-term thinking. Jeff had no clue how it really worked. He saw numbers as leverage, not as truth. What he didn't realize was that the entire department's funding approval hinged on one key document, the Strategic Resource Allocation Plan, or SRAP. Most execs handed SRAP off to someone else. I used to fill it out myself. It fed into the final department budget, which then passed through two approvals, CFO and COO. If you missed the SRAP deadline, your budget didn't even make it to the table. Jeff was already late getting his inputs together, probably expecting someone else to catch the details. No one had. Or maybe they had, but no one wanted to correct him anymore. So I made a simple adjustment. One tab in the planning tool. A cell reference changed from a live lookup to a static value. It looked fine on the surface, but it meant the final headcount projection in the SRAP was short by 7 FTEs. That's 7 roles Jeff was planning to hire for, roles that now, on paper, didn't exist. Then I sat back and waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, Liz messaged me again, this time with a screenshot. It was an internal memo from finance. Budget allocation for strategy division under review due to inconsistencies in staffing projections. Please pause all pending requisitions. Translation: Jeff's hiring plan just got iced. He must have gone ballistic. I could imagine him pacing his office, voice rising, blaming everyone in sight. The man didn't understand how his own department functioned, just knew the numbers he wanted to hit, and assumed someone else would backfill the details. That someone used to be me. Now, there was no net. I kept tabs through whispers, Slack messages, LinkedIn posts between the lines. The company was reevaluating strategic priorities. Leadership was leaning into operational efficiency. It was all just damage control. HR posted a job opening I'd seen 3 times already. It meant someone had quit again. Jeff's people were bleeding out one by one. The kicker came when I heard from Tasha again. She worked closely with the budget team and had access to the actual review logs. Apparently, the COO flagged Jeff's numbers personally, asked why his department had so few hires budgeted when headcount projections didn't match project volume. No one could explain it. The system showed everything submitted on time, but the math didn't line up. My fingerprints were nowhere. It was just enough of a contradiction to stall everything. Jeff, of course, tried to push through. I could tell by the way things accelerated, half-finished decks, late-night requests to analysts still on the inside. He probably thought brute force could fix it. But bureaucracy doesn't move on urgency, it moves on paperwork. And if your paperwork's wrong, you don't move at all. I should have felt smug, but it was something deeper than that. Satisfaction, sure, but laced with a weird kind of grief. This wasn't just about screwing Jeff. It was about watching the machine reject someone who thought he could fake it, who thought the work didn't matter because he'd never done it himself. I built that department with care. Quiet care. I stayed late to catch edge cases, taught new hires how to think beyond spreadsheets, even wrote onboarding guides that Jeff's people were still using. And now here he was, undone not by sabotage, but by absence, by the simple fact that the person who kept the gears turning wasn't there anymore, and no one else had learned how. That was the real revenge. I didn't destroy anything, I just walked away and let the rot surface. But I wasn't finished. The SRAP mess had drawn attention up the chain, but that was just internal turbulence. If I really wanted this to land, the kind of consequence that echoed, I needed to expose Jeff's vision for what it really was, a lie held together by jargon and borrowed ideas. And I knew exactly where to hit him next. Jeff loved 2 things more than anything else, his title and his slides. He treated PowerPoint like scripture. Slick fonts, vague arrows, the kind of buzzword-heavy nonsense that sounds important until you actually read it. Transformative synergies. Next-gen operational value. But under the polish, it was smoke. He didn't understand the systems. He just pitched what looked good in a boardroom. What he didn't know was that one of those decks, the one he presented to the executive committee for next year's flagship initiative, was built on my data. Or rather, what used to be my data. The forecast model I'd created back in Q1 had been quietly repackaged with a fresh color scheme and his name on the bottom corner. Same numbers, same structure, but with half the context removed. I could tell immediately. He'd stripped out the qualifiers, left assumptions unchallenged, and turned cautious projections into guaranteed wins. It was reckless, and it was the perfect lever. I knew someone on the executive analytics team, Travis, an old colleague from my early years. We weren't close, but we had mutual respect. He was the kind of guy who valued clean work and didn't like being misled. So I sent him a message, phrased carefully. "Hey, take a closer look at the demand assumptions in Jeff's Q3 forecast. Looks like some upstream logic got misrepresented. Just thought you should know." No accusations, just a quiet nudge, enough to make someone like Travis curious. It didn't take long for him to reply. "You're right. Model doesn't match the baseline in our central repository. He used a version that was deprecated 2 months ago. This could be a big deal." And just like that, the fire was lit. Within a few days, the cracks became headlines, internal ones anyway. An audit was ordered on Jeff's strategic proposal. The CFO's office flagged the inconsistencies. He tried to defend it, of course, claimed he'd been handed incomplete data, blamed the analyst who compiled the final deck. An intern, apparently. Classic. He didn't realize people like Travis had already traced the entire trail and knew who had manipulated what. Word was, he got loud in a meeting, defensive, red-faced. Then silence. Liz texted me later that week. "Jeff's been put on leave. No official statement. People are whispering." I stared at my phone for a long time. No celebration, no fireworks, just a quiet exhale. It was over. I never stepped foot in that building again. Didn't need to. I'd made my point. Jeff had tried to erase me, and in doing so, exposed how hollow his leadership really was. All I did was hold up a mirror. And somewhere in the mess, I started to feel like myself again. Not as a cog in the system, but as a builder. A craftsman. Someone who left things better than he found them. That company didn't deserve me, but maybe someone else would. I never got a thank you. Not from the board, not from the team, and definitely not from Jeff. But that's fine. I didn't need one. What I needed was peace. And strangely, I found it. Not all at once, but in pieces. In quiet mornings with my coffee, when I didn't feel a pit in my stomach thinking about meetings that used to suck the air out of the room. In the realization that the value of what I did wasn't in the title or the paycheck. It was in the people who trusted me. The systems I built that actually worked. And the way I'd held my ground without ever having to raise my voice. After Jeff was put on leave, he disappeared from LinkedIn for a while. When he finally resurfaced months later, it was with a cryptic update. Exploring new opportunities in strategic leadership. No mention of his last role, no endorsements from his former team, just silence where reputation should have been, a resume with a burn mark. Liz left too, a few weeks later. She found a better role in a leaner org that valued analytical thinking over office theater. She said in her exit message, "I've learned the difference between leading with clarity and managing with noise. I know which one I'll follow next time." I knew that was for me. As for me, I took some time. Not out of fear, just to breathe. I'd spent too long being the guy who held things together from the background, the glue, the fixer. But now I realized I wasn't just reacting to bad leadership. I was capable of more. Eventually, I accepted a position with a mid-sized logistics firm out of Denver. Smaller team, smarter leadership, and a CTO who actually read my case studies. On my second day, I sat in a room with people who listened. Really listened when I spoke. No politics, no flash, just a hunger to build better systems. They didn't hire me because of my titles. They hired me because I told them what I'd learned. Not the revenge, that part stayed private, but the lesson. When you strip away the noise, real work speaks for itself.